Signore e signori, buonasera. Welcome to New York University, Casa Italiana, zerilli-marimò, for this very special evening with Rebecca Miller. As you know, this is part of a series that is a spin-off of Le Conversazioni. Le Conversazioni is a literary and much more festival started by Antonio Monda with Davide Azzolini, originally in Capri and now all over the world. And we are lucky to have a chapter of this Conversazioni here at the Casa with the Forgotten Gems, when Antonio invites guests to share with him and with us 3 films that have not received proper consideration, should be reconsidered, that for any reason they want to bring back to our attention and give them one more chance. And tonight we're very happy that we have director, author, writer Rebecca Miller in dialogue with Antonio. Antonio will tell you something more formal presenting Rebecca. I introduced Antonio on the stage probably thousands of times, but there is one more thing that I want to tell you tonight. In a week, he's going to fly to Milan for the Salone del Mobile. Do you know what it is? It's an international exposition of furniture, and Milan, Lombardy, is one of the big centers for the... But guess what Antonio is doing there? He's not going to build any furniture. But he's bringing 2 special environments conceived by David Lynch, especially for the Salone del Mobile, because Antonio, in one of his interviews with Lynch, discovered that David Lynch is also a very able carpenter. He makes furniture. So that was the perfect combination, and there's going to be a dialogue between him and Lynch on building furniture and making films. And so there is always something new and exciting that happens with Antonio. And I'm asking you to welcome very warmly Antonio Monda and Rebecca Miller. Thank you.
Buonasera, welcome. It's my great pleasure and honor to share the stage with Rebecca Miller, author, novelist, filmmaker, artist. And we have a long program. You know the format. I asked Rebecca to select 3 films in total freedom, and that she believes they're not and are overlooked or forgotten. And I'm happy to say that I love all of them. And in particular the first one, because she picked a filmmaker that I think has been one of the greatest artists of the 7th art of cinema, and she's quite unknown. Why don't we start seeing the first clip and then we start the conversation? You want to introduce the clip or do you want to comment at the end? It's totally up to you.
Well, what do you think? What works best? I can't remember.
Generally we do afterwards.
Yeah, let's do it after.
Okay, so it's a surprise. I just want to say that it's a Russian film, nothing else.
I believe it's quite extraordinary how she managed to deliver this scene without a single close-up. But I want to...
Yeah, I mean, he walks into a bit of a close-up, but basically, yeah. And also, I was worried that it would make no sense to the audience without some explanation. But I now feel like, actually, it makes me cry, this scene. Actually, it's very clear what it's about, that he's decided to live with his father, that abandoned the family. So I think, that's just such an amazing example of choreography inside the camera and what you can do. And also just the detail of the place and how they're living in this, like a piece of a grander apartment in I guess, in the 1970s in Russia.
Let me say briefly, the director is Kira Muratova. The film was shot in 1971, but it was sort of censored until 1987. During the Perestroika, it was possible to watch this film in what was the Soviet Union. Do you like her work in general, also her other films?
I do. I do. I've actually discovered her fairly recently. A friend of mine mentioned her. She has some extremely surreal films. Several of her films were banned. This one was really banned because of the obsessive love of the mother for the son, which is, to me, it's like not that obsessive, but it's kind of like, I suppose she needs him too much. He's too central in her life. And it's a absolutely psychologically fascinating film, but also just the way that she uses the camera in general in her other work as well. And this film particularly I find just very emotional and the way that she uses images, like the way that she shows the father and the son projected, because the son always loves to project things. I don't know. It's just very pure. Her cinema is very pure, I think.
Do you believe that cinema at its best, at its purest, is silent?
No, I mean, I love Woody Allen, or, I personally have made films that are where a lot of the humor and pacing is carried by language. But I do think that, and I think that the moments that they speak, the moments that she suddenly speaks, are so wonderful, but partly because of the silence, and certainly some of the greatest films have had fewer words in them, but also a lot of great films have a lot of words in them. I don't think it's exclusive that you have to have fewer words to make a wonderful film at all. But the images do have to carry meaning, and it does matter how you shoot. And this is a great example of two people in a room, where you feel so much tension, and the camera is so aware of the psychology of it all, and yet is so patient, and there's not a lot of cutting. You could easily shoot that with lots of cuts and lots of different angles and lots of what they call coverage, which is the ghastly word. But this is like, she's really thought about it, and she also trusts her performers. I mean, that performance of that woman, I saw an interview of the actress as well, who she was a very well-known stage actress, and she worked very carefully with Muratova, about this character. She wanted, and she often repeats things like, krasne, whatever, which I guess is red. But, she's a kind of bubbly person, but she has a very serious job in the government as well. She's just a fascinating character. And just the level of detail in behavior, and and also the detail in production design is just beautiful to me.
Let me try a slippery, maybe dangerous question. Is there anything in the film that tells us that this film is directed by a woman?
Well, you could say that because it's about a woman and her relationship with her son, and it's sort of from her point of view, although you feel his point of view too a lot in this film. But then again, you look at Cassavetes, A Woman Under the Influence, and that was directed by a man. I really believe that people should be allowed to exchange everything with each other that they can legitimately exchange. In other words, sex or any other experience, as long as you have somehow developed the authority to do so through either research or living, imagination or lived experience. I don't think that people should be stuck in their own little lives.
I want to recommend to everybody, particularly to my students, to watch another film by Muratova called Aesthetic Syndrome. I think it's her masterpiece together with this one. Let me show now my first choice. Is a French-Polish film, and let's watch it, and then I'll say a few words about it. The year was 1983. The director, Andrzej Wajda, one of the greatest European and world director. And it's a completely different approach. It's all written, wonderful dialogues. The script is by Jean-Claude Carrière. Great performances, not only Gérard Depardieu, but also the great Polish actor Wojciech Psoniak. First of all, how do you like the film? And then
I love it. And I love this scene so much. Depardieu is just such a force,
And of course, in the film, Danton is the hero and Robespierre is the villain, probably also in real life. And the film mirrors what was happening in Europe at the time. There are several references in the character of Danton to Lech Wałęsa, who was starting the rebellion against the communist world. But what is interesting here is the way they have a completely different view. Robespierre, the incorruptible, believes that state and committees are sacred. Danton believes that life is sacred. He tells you, you don't eat, you don't have sex, you don't drink. Of course, he's corrupt. He's not an angel at all, but he's human. This is what is the tragedy of this confrontation. As you know, Robespierre will condemn him to death. He will be beheaded, and 3 months later, he will be beheaded himself. And I always found disturbing and moving at the same time the last 2 sentences that Danton say before being killed. First of all, he said to his executioner, whose name was Sanson, I read it, "Show the people my head. It is well worth seeing." And then a minute before dying, he said, "I come from nothing. I'm bound to nothing." It's terrible, isn't it?
It's such a powerful thing, and it's very interesting what you say. Is it's true. It's a completely different approach, but perfect for this. For this, you wouldn't want the other approach for this, you know. And I also really love how the way that that he's photographed it. Like you sort of start almost in profile, you know, quite a lot in profile, and gradually you creep around so that you really are, especially with Danton, you see him fully frontal, and then Robespierre, you're never completely, so you're closer to Danton. It's a very subtle kind of way of getting in closer and closer to him as a character and to move inside the scene. And also the color is so vivid and glorious, and like the you know the way that they're in this tiny room is so claustrophobic, and you feel how everything is sort of hemming them in. The history is hemming them in.
And there is another thing I want to tell you is about Andrzej Wajda. Has been one of the great masters of Polish cinema. He died, I think, 5 or 6 years ago, maybe 7 years ago. If you're not familiar with his work, I would recommend to watch L'Uomo di Marmo, The Marble Man, which is, I think, is an extraordinary film, or Ash and Diamond.
Ashes and Diamonds. It's great, yeah.
Finally, the film was presented here in New York at the New York Film Festival. After the screening, Wajda arranged a screening for the president of France of the time. Mitterrand was horrified.
Why?
Because what he said about politics, about communism, although he was not a communist, but he found somehow an accusation of what revolution can do.
I see. That's interesting. Yeah.
And sorry.
It feels so fresh and modern, that scene. It feels very modern.
And there is another idea, directorial idea, that Wajda stole from Kubrick. You might remember that in Spartacus, all the Romance actors were American, while on the Romans were English, or vice versa. I'm sorry, the other way around. Here, the Danton and his people are French. Robespierre is Polish, and all his followers.
Oh.
And actually, if you notice, he was dubbed. The Polish actor is dubbed. It's not his voice. Yeah, you can see the.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go now to your second choice. It's a great, great Indian film.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we won't explain it. It's gonna be you're gonna be very perplexed for a little while. But we'll explain afterwards.
My friend, the director, Stefano Albertini, asked me, since today is only Thursday, is there any spiritual film? I think this is the one.
This is a very spiritual film. Yeah, it's one of the great films, I think, that ever was made, I think.
The title is Diva by Satyajit Ray. Let's watch. So, Devi, not Diva. And why did you pick this film, and how did you discover it?
I actually don't remember how I saw it. I think I saw it really in a repertory house here in the city a long time ago, and I just was blown away by it. And to me, it's like her horror at that her. It's partly about the clash of more modern culture in a family, and then the ancient culture in India, the more traditional, which her father-in-law represents, and her husband is away, and the father-in-law becomes convinced that she's the manifestation of the goddess Kali, and all these people start to worship her from the village and so on. She has to eventually escape. I mean, but it's just the way that it's almost like waves of cinema. It's like done in this way that's this sort of inevitable kind of magical, but yet it's totally real at the same time. I mean, one of my favorite moments in this scene is where her feet curl up and she scratches, on the wall, and it really the sense of being a woman who's completely imprisoned in a situation that she has no control over. And now because he's the leader of the household and the head of the household, his true belief that she's a goddess is gonna destroy her, really. But it's it's a great movie about faith and about female imprisonment, I guess. I just love it.
Can we say that it's also a film about the need for the divine? Somehow we need something above us, transcendental.
Yeah, we need something. Everybody's got to serve someone. Everyone needs something to worship, I suppose, and especially in that culture, I suppose, which is a very spiritual one, especially. I mean, it's because there's figures in that world in the film that are much more modern, that are much more sort of agnostic and are not, much more materialist, and so it's about also that clash.
The actress who plays the young woman who is believed to be the reincarnation of the goddess, Devi means goddess, was only 15 years old when she starred in this film. Do you like also Satyajit Ray, other films like The World of Apple, Pater Panchali?
I do. I love also Carlotta, which is a wonderful, wonderful film that's kind of reminds me of Chekhov in a way. I think that he's wonderful with the sort of subtle ironies of life that and how people imprison each other through relationships. I just think but also the way that nobody can make a film like this anymore. Like, you can't make a film like this. It has to do with I don't know exactly even how to describe why you can't do it. It has to do a combination of how it's made visually, but also how close it is maybe culturally to something that I don't think probably exists. I don't know. I mean, it's like, it's sort of, I think it's sublime in some ways. I mean, if you look at the whole film, looking at it in this little teeny bit of it doesn't really give you a sense, although I do think it gives you somewhat of a sense of what the whole film is like. Especially when she's then kneeling in front of all these villagers, and her horror at the situation is just so, you can really feel it. It's really visceral.
She's very pure. She's virgin, and not only physically virgin. And there is also an ambiguity. There is a moment where we don't understand if she believes to be the goddess or not.
Yes. Well, I think she starts to believe that she's maybe the goddess.
And do you think she believes until the end that she's the goddess?
I don't know.
I don't want to give you the end.
Yeah. I'm not really sure. I think that she has these experiences. You're watching her have experiences which are so powerful when she's being worshipped that it's really hard to resist. It's like she gets almost like exhausted by it, and you see her sitting there for hours and hours and hours, and she's just like, and it's also that's why I'm saying it's about a lot also about faith, and about how faith can like infect another person, or it's kind of like she catches this idea inside of her, even though at first she knows it's not true, and then gradually she's sort of, I think, starts to believe it is true.
I strongly recommend to watch this film. Let me go to my second choice, which is a completely different film. It's a romantic story directed by Joseph Mankiewicz. The title is The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, starring Rex Harrison and Gene Tierney. I think it's one of the most romantic films ever made. This woman has a love affair with a ghost. You mentioned before Woody Allen. I was thinking of Purple Rays of Cairo, when Cecilia Mia Farrow has an affair with a man who comes out from the screen. It's nothing different here. And Rex Harrison stars in this film, and Gene Tierney. We were discussing before. You like Gene Tierney as an actress?
I do. I really do like her. Wasn't she in
Laura?
In Laura, she's wonderful in Laura, and also The Razor's Edge. Wasn't it her? And Laura. She's so great. I love her. I think she's really mysterious, and can have, like in Laura, she's really dangerous and sort of has this diabolical kind of underpinning, which is amazing for such a little angel face. Like, she's really wonderful. I was so curious about this film with you. Like, the first time I saw it, I thought, well, of course he's real and it's really all happening. And then I thought, well, is it though? I mean, like, is this really her not being, her talent, her writing, her resistance to the real flesh and blood person? What do you feel?
I feel that it's what makes her life possible. It's not her imagination, it's real, and gives life to her through love. And at the end, I don't want to give you the end, you understand that it's real. It's absolutely real. How do you like Rex Harrison? We all remember for My Fair Lady in particular, but
yeah, I find him a little hard to
I agree. It's a little bit ham,
Honestly, yeah. He just seems like he's kind of theatrical in a way that I find like a little bit jolts me out of things a little bit.
And how about Joseph Mankiewicz? Because we all remember and love, I think, All About Eve, but he made so many beautiful films.
Yeah, I mean, he has a huge variety of what, of what he's capable of. All About Eve is one of my favorite movies, and it's an incredibly beautifully paced movie. I mean, this is a wonderful film, like in terms of its sort of its pacing and its mystery and the way he uses the camera and all of that. It's not, for some reason, I've had this weird resistance to this film, and I think it has to do with Rex Harrison, actually, and my feelings about him, and kind of like, I don't know how to analyze it, but Mankiewicz is just a great, director.
It's interesting because the film was a huge hit at the time, 1949, but now it's completely or almost forgotten. And there was a musical based on the film, a radio show, and they wanted to make a remake with Jack Nicholson in the early 90s, but it never happened. Maybe it's good that they didn't do it again.
Wasn't there also a television show?
Yes, a television
right?
show.
Yeah,
a television show.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Okay, let's go to Rebecca's third choice. It's an American film, directed by a Czech filmmaker. A wonderful scene from Taking Off, which was Milos Forman's first American film.
Yeah. Yes. I think this is one of the great films I've ever seen. I mean, it's just like so funny. And also, just everything about it, it's so beautifully paced. It's so funny. All the performers were so great. And every single person who doesn't have lines is like a real character. That's what's so important. It's so rare. This is a great film. I mean, I actually was very influenced by this film in terms of its theme, which is it's basically the 70s. I can't remember what year this was. What does it say?
69, I think. 69.
Yeah, so it was just
70,
1970. So it's just in the sort of sexual and marijuana revolution, and it's about these very bourgeois suburban people whose daughter sort of takes off, and and then they lose their minds, and meanwhile the daughter's the sanest of the whole bunch, and it's kind of like it's just a wonderful movie, but it's also just such a great example of behavior and how far you can stretch behavior and it's still real. And
I noticed that all the films that you picked are about generations. Mother and son, father-in-law and daughter-in-law, and now a young woman who leaves. Apparently, Milos Forman got the inspiration from a Beatles song, She's Leaving Home, and now the parents try to understand the youth.
It's very interesting because I think I do tend to write about generations and how family affects each other and creates each other and the conflicts of and make a lot of my films are about that too, and books. But it's true that there's something so moving to me about how innocent the young people are in this, that they're the ones who sort of have it all together, and the parents are just imagining one perversity after another, that what their daughter's up to, and then she arrives and she's like a little scrubbed bandana, and they're completely debauched. But yeah, it's wonderful, and yet I also feel again like a film. Even though now, of course, we have legalized marijuana and all that stuff, but yet there's something so still very relevant about the scene. It still feels like it could be a contemporary scene in a way. That thing of wanting to reach your own kids, understand them, because at a certain point, weirdly, you were a kid and then suddenly you're on the other side of the fence and you're trying to understand the other side.
I had the great privilege of knowing Forman. And once I asked them, why all your characters or most of your protagonists are rebels? Think of One Flew Over the Cuckoo Nest, Hair, Man in the Moon, even Amadeus, in a sense.
Is what? What is the word?
They're rebels.
Oh, rebels.
And he told me because I'm a coward, and and I put all my rebellions on the screens. And do you like his major works? What are considered major works? Amadeus, One Flew Over the Cuckoo Nest.
I do, but I love Loves of a Blonde, and
which is his first Czech film,
and Policeman's Ball, and this film the best, actually. I mean, I do really like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest as well, but there's something about the way he has a way of creating, especially the way he uses crowds, groups of people. I've never actually seen anyone do it like him. He has an incredible way to make group behavior on screen work really well, which is very, very difficult. And there's something about the humor and the way he transmits the humor. And of course, this is Buck Henry's script.
You can see Buck Henry.
Yeah, so that's also it's a great, great script. But I still think that Forman had this kind of like a very liquidy, sly camera there's a sort of Czech, I don't know, this sort of depressive humor that I love so much in that aspect of his work. And then later, I think he's an amazing filmmaker, but I somehow am drawn to these earlier films.
I totally agree with you. Even when they don't speak, they're real characters. We know them. We understand their passion, their feelings, their reaction. Now it's time for my third and final choice. It's an Italian film. The title is Bellissima by Luchino Visconti. It's one of the most heartbreaking and cruelest scenes ever filmed in Italy. It's based on a real story. Apparently there was this woman who was convinced that her daughter was not only bellissima, but also able to act. And this young girl made a screen test with Blasetti, who was the patriarch of Italian cinema. I think it's one of the greatest performances by Anna Magnani. I don't know if you agree.
Oh, great. Oh, my God, yeah.
She is the film. She carries the film. And the guy who was kicked out of the screening test movie theater is Walter Chiari, who was a famous comedian in Italy. And he's a very slimy character. Do you like Visconti in general? Do you like his film, The Leopard?
The Leopard, my God, yes.
Yeah. And did you know this film before?
No, I had never seen this film. This made me see the film.
What is your reaction?
It's so fast paced, and the whole film is really led by her performance, which is nearing a point of hysteria all the time, but yet she's so rooted in reality that you accept it. You know, normally it would be a little exhausting, but and also what I love is all the detail of this 1950s, I guess,
51,
Rome,
yeah.
The right after the war, they're all living in these very impoverished apartments. They have a dream of another apartment, of a house of their own, and she's basically blowing all the money on this screen test for this little girl. And it's so, it's touching. There's realism, but it's not what one thinks of as neo-realism in the sense that it's hyped up. It's kind of, it's a different tone than that. It's like a really interesting hybrid of those two, of a sort of, there's a comic element to it. So tonally, it's very complex, I think, the film,
I totally agree. It's time to go, but I have a little surprise for you. Since most of the films, with the exception, of course, of Taking Off, are tragic, I have a comic relief, a little. So I asked my friend Dado, I want to thank Giuseppe, who edited the films, to screen our last clip, which is a comedy.
Okay.
And it's a surprise for Rebecca.
Thank you. It's time to go. I want to thank you all. Thank Casa Italiana and thank the wonderful
Thank you
Rebecca
so much.
Miller. See you next Thursday here.